Hello, everybody. Good evening on this Tuesday night. Let me, where did my cursor go? There it is. Let me turn the music down here. There we are. All right. How's my volume? We had to make some adjustments when I was on, or when Amanda was doing something on some show at the piano. I forget exactly what we did, but we had to do something where we connected all this to her computer, and the volume levels all got changed over here. So, put in the chat. Amanda will holler out to me for reasons I will get into in a moment. I am not able to look at the chat tonight, so this is a little weird. Usually, I have it going. I can kind of see stuff happening, but I don't have that tonight. So I was thinking, as far as what to do for the evening. We were watching or we started watching on either Netflix or Hulu, I forget which, the Peter Jackson Beatles documentary from, I'm not sure how many years ago that came out. It's been out for a little while. And it was what struck me about it is we watched like the first half of the three films, and because these films are like 2.5 hours long each. And a lot of that first one, or at least the first half, is the recordings, the video they did while they were doing the prepping for the Get Back production. And so all the songwriting they did over the space of like a ridiculously short amount of time. It was like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something. They were just intensely composing songs during that stretch of time. And I thought, it might be kind of cool to do not something like that on my show, but actually maybe try and compose a short piece on my show so you guys can see a little bit about what goes into it. You won't see my exact process when I'm composing stuff offline, so to speak. That's because I use a program called Finale, and entering notes into it is incredibly slow and tedious and painful, etc., etc. I don't know all the keyboard shortcuts and stuff, which I think do speed it up a bit. Should probably learn those. So it can take a really long time in Finale to get anything written down. But the advantage is you have a perfectly legible, looks like it's been printed by an actual music publisher, copy of the score, even in its intermediate stages. You don't have to deal with handwritten notes and like, what the heck what does this mean? You don't have, mostly you don't have that. So what I decided to do was, let's see if this works here. There we go. All right, unfortunately I see that my camera placement's changed a bit too, and I'm kind of blocked by, it's a little better. A little bit closer. Okay. I think that'll work. The microphone's still out of the way enough. So what I thought I would do is just kind of show you guys for this show, and I've got some other stuff too in case I really hope this isn't boring for people. This is definitely an experiment. I don't have any really preconceived notions of what to write. I'm coming into this completely blank. So tell you what, first thing usually that I will start off with, it's not always a conscious decision. Sometimes I just kind of put my hand down on the keyboard and something comes out. But a lot of the time what I will do is I'll try and think of a key first, like C major, for instance, or A major. So why don't you guys put in the chat, we'll have a little audience participation here. Why don't you guys put in the chat any letter from A through G, and it can either have a flat or a sharp added to it. And we'll take maybe the third one that comes through, and I'll have Amanda look at the chat and shout out from the other room what the key is going to be. You can also specify the key being major or minor. All right, so we'll give that a sec. And obviously I've got some blank sheet music on the screen next to me. Let's see how we're doing on the battery. Oh, good, it's not charging. Why is it not charging? Oh, it doesn't really matter at the moment. The battery, it's got plenty of battery. Okay, now it's charging. I want to make sure it doesn't, die in the middle of the show. Anyhow, so what you're seeing on the sheet music is a nice little app on the iPad called Penultimate, and it's a note-taking app. They've got all kinds of different presets, from just a straight blank page to lined paper and so forth, and this is obviously a music score. What's unfortunate about it, and there's no way for me to change it, is it's kind of big. And unfortunately, that means that I can't fit a whole lot on each page. So I've actually prepped it. Oh, I thought I prepped it with a whole bunch of pages in anticipation of the fact that I will not be able to fit a whole lot on every page. Okay, that's probably being optimistic. There we go. Now we got a bunch of pages. Okay, Amanda, were there any key suggestions that came through? Okay, what do we got? What's the third one? No, what's the third one? We're gonna do. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that doesn't work. Oh wait, did she put something? A key suggestion, but is F. Okay, so F major, and so there's no major or minor, right? It's just F. Okay. So the default assumption is, unless you specify that something is in a minor key, it's major. So if somebody says it's in the key of F, they're probably talking about F major. They would have to say specifically it's F minor. All right, so key of F. So first thing we do is we put in the key signature. And the key signature is kind of a shorthand. It's so you don't have to write in modifications to necessary notes every single time you write one of those notes in the score. Meaning, F major is played almost entirely on the white keys. This B flat here, you can see, is a black key. That's the only black key. Okay. So what we do when we create a key signature for that, if you haven't seen this before, is we put a flat symbol on the line in each staff that represents the note B. And so what that tells us, when you see that at the beginning of every line, and unfortunately I'm going to have to, I probably won't do this on every page because it's going to get tedious. But what that tells us to do is every time I see the note B written in the score, I play a B flat instead. Now, what you'll probably see at some point here is if there are other notes that I end up wanting to modify, like instead of playing a D up here, I want to play a D flat, I'll write in a similar symbol to what I just did, but it'll just be right in front of just the one note that it impacts. Okay, so we have a key of F, and then the next thing is a time signature. So time signatures typically are either duple or triple, meaning they can be divvied up into 2 or 4 beats, or they can be divvied up into 3 beats. So why don't you guys put in the chat time signature suggestion? We can do, just keep it easy and say either 4/4, 4/4, or 3/4, 3/4. Or we could do perhaps 6/8, 6/8. So put one of those in, and we'll take the second suggestion this time. I'll have Amanda rattle that off from the chat. Yes, this is going to be interesting. So I don't always do all this first when I'm writing something. Oftentimes I will just start playing, and my hands will just kind of land in a particular key, and that's usually the key I end up using unless there's a strong reason to move it. And different keys have different sounds too, which is kind of interesting. C major just sounds kind of normal and natural to me. F major, maybe a little bit brighter. If you want a really dark sounding piece, the key of E flat minor is very, very dark, very different tone quality to that. Key of E flat majors. Got some richness to it that's really nice. All right, Amanda, any time signature suggestions? Second one. 4/4. All right. So when something is in 4/4, a shorthand notation is just writing a C in there. That just means common time, and common time is 4/4 time. The other thing you can do for a time signature is, I did on the second line there. Trying to point at, there we go. I have to kind of do that. So I'm going to take that out because, oops, it doesn't need to be there. There we go. All right. So we're in 4/4 time. That's one of the easier time signatures to utilize. Put that back there for a sec. All right. So the next step is typically trying to come up with an idea. What are we going to do? So let's see. We want to keep this fairly simple because honestly, sometimes like when I wrote my piano sonata, it's an hour-long piece of music. It took the better part of a year to write that. Some of the shorter pieces, like the Magical Mystery Hour theme that I did for Amanda and Paul, that probably took the better part of 2 or 3 hours to do. And then, over the next couple days, there's a little bit of editing and minor changes and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and keep this short for tonight. But one thing that bears keeping in mind when you're writing music, you want to have something that gives the music direction, someplace to go, motion, if that's what you're going for. And one of the best ways to do that, music is all about conflict and resolution. And one of the best ways to create that kind of motion is have a large gap like that, where you do this big jump. And so, that just creates this natural tension that you then want to resolve by bringing that back down. So it's just something that's not necessarily a conscious thought going in my head, but it's just kind of in there. It's not necessarily something you do right away. You don't necessarily start off by... As you see how that bum bum way up there then creates that tension that you then resolve by bringing it back down. So create a big gap and then shrink it is kind of the idea. Something that'll just to listen for that may end up happening here. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll come up with maybe an accompaniment pattern first. That's something like... And then we can have a melody line on top of that. You get the idea. So that's usually what I'll do is I'll start kind of playing around. Oftentimes whatever comes out first is not really what I end up writing down. It's just kind of those initial ideas to get that flowing. So to that end, I like this. It's a really nice sound. It's a nicely spaced chord. It's very open. I really like it with the major third, that interval, or really that. On top. So what you're doing is you're creating a chord that's open, but it also wants to go somewhere. So you can hear how even in an accompaniment, you can create almost a secondary melody or a pseudo melody, for lack of a better word. You can create some motion in there for it to go somewhere and do things. I don't know if that's what's actually going to happen tonight. I have no idea. So let's see. With all bearing all that in mind, let's see what we come up with here. Well, actually, first off, since we have the accompaniment pattern established, we're going to write that down. So we do this. And generally speaking, these notes represent certain snippets of time, a certain length of time. And so generally speaking, you want the notes in each of these staffs, the notes in here, which is for the most part what the right hand's going to play, to line up time-wise with the notes here. So in other words, if I have just written in a bunch of eighth notes like I just did, and we can count them out, there's, in 4/4 time, you have 4 quarter notes to a measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth notes are half that duration. 16th notes, which are represented like that, are a quarter of that duration. So there's 16 16th notes in a 4/4 measure. There's 8 eighth notes in a 4/4 measure, and so forth. You can get the idea. It's mathematically nice and precise. So generally speaking, we want the notes of different durations to line up with the notes in the other staff, the notes that are going to be played at the same time. I have seen printed scores where they don't do that, and holy God, it's difficult to play. It's ridiculous. It's so hard to figure out where the notes are supposed to go, and all that needs to be fixed is a spacing issue between where the notes physically appear on the page. It's just goofy. So we were going to, eraser, that's what I wanted. There we are. All right. So now we have the accompaniment pattern, and probably I'll be doing a little bit of shorthand for tonight. Like I will write in changes to the accompaniment pattern. I'm not going to write in the same thing over and over again. This is actually one area where finale is kind of nice because I can write that pattern in for one measure and then just copy and paste it a whole bunch of times for successive measures. And the measures that you can see on the screen here, that bar line, that vertical line, that's just a way of dividing up the music so you can easily see the beats. In a 4/4 time, the strong beats are typically beats 1 and 3, and the weak beats are 2 and 4, which is why syncopation oftentimes sounds so cool, because it puts a strong emphasis on what is normally a weak beat. So it's like, whoa, that was different. And then the measure is just an easy way to kind of quantize and divide up all of these notes that would otherwise just be a big jumbled mess. So that's why we draw that vertical line in there. So now we have the accompaniment. Doing something like that is a fairly common thing. What we're doing is going from the major key to what's called the relative minor. So D minor is the relative minor of F major, and relative minor just means it's all the exact same notes as in the F major scale. You just start on a different note. So F major is that, D minor, just starting on a different note. It's the only difference, only change. So it's very, very easy to make those kinds of key changes. You hear that in pop music all the time. Really, a lot of music uses that technique. It's easy. You can just go straight from one to the other, and you don't really have to have any kind of transition in there. You can just do it, and it works because it's all the same notes. Conversely, going from, say, F major, even though physically those are a lot closer together, you can hear how different they sound, and it's jarring to do a switch. I just realized that I've got my piano mics muted. Sorry about that. Oops. That should be a little better. Anyhow, it's kind of jarring. So if you want to do a modulation, that's what you call going from one key to another, like that, you have to set it up somehow. And that's actually one of the challenges I really like about composing, is how to get to distant keys, ones that sound very different from where you started, and make it sound natural, and not like, we just got shoved into a different room, So from F major to F sharp, you might do. Let's see, how do we do this? Let's see. Okay. Nope, that didn't really work. Yeah, I'm probably not going to try and modulate to that key anyway, but you can see the difficulty. Like it's not easy to do. There we go. There it is. So you do F major, B flat minor, and then you're in G flat major or F sharp major. Take your pick. It's the same thing on piano. Now that chord progression I just played doesn't necessarily sound like this is where it wants to end, at least not to my ear. But yeah, if you do it right in an actual piece, you can make it sound like that's where you intended to go. So anyhow, all right. So we've got accompaniment pattern. Let's see. And I have also always have to be careful not to play too much because I don't remember stuff for very long. I literally don't remember what I just played. So I have to jot down. Yeah, we'll put in another measure of that. So, okay, so what I've just written in the treble staff, this top one here with the squiggly stylized G. Incidentally, the treble symbol is a stylized letter G, and the circle, not the circle at the little tail that hangs down, but the circle at the bottom of the G circles the line on the staff that represents the note G. So it's kind of an easy way to remember treble. It's circling that line. And then in the bass clef, which is the kind of sad frowny face sideways, those two dots enclose the line that represents the note F in the bass clef. So it helps you kind of, having the treble and bass clef symbols in there is what gives you your orientation. That's what gives the lines of the staff meaning. Without those symbols in there, those lines could be anything. There are other clefs. Treble and bass are the most common. There's also an alto clef, which is kind of a very stylized letter C. And the alto clef encloses, I think, at the middle line of its staff, and that line is the note C. And even knowing that, I'm not used to reading alto clef. Treble and bass, it's just like reading a book. I don't even need to think about it anymore. But with the alto clef, I literally have to okay, that's C, that one's B, that one's A, that one, I have to almost count out every single note because I'm not used to reading it. It just, it moves everything around. So, what is G in the treble clef in alto clef is the note A. Yeah, it's weird. Alto clef is useful for instruments and alto singers. Instruments whose range puts them in some of these middle notes a lot. Those are notes that would appear between these two sets of staff lines. And so you're writing notes out in that white space and you have to draw in little lines. You don't draw lines all the way across, you just draw them right where the notes are. And so if you're playing a ton of stuff in that cram and you're playing in there all the time, you're not really venturing too far beyond it, alto clef makes a lot more sense. Just for most musicians, unless you're playing like a viola, or I'm trying to think what else uses. I don't even know offhand what else uses alto clef. commonly. There's not that much out there that does. Anyhow, what I just put in the top staff, I'm getting back to what I initially was bringing up. That sort of box little symbol, that is called a whole rest. That tells us that there are no notes in that staff for that entire measure. There are various different rest symbols for different durations. That's the whole rest. So what I was doing here, and you can see, so I've just played the first measure. So that bottom note, the left-hand most note is this F down here, and then the C, then the A. Next measure. I do kind of like starting off with a big jump right at the start there. So in this measure, then, we'll do the symbol for a half rest, which is the same thing as a whole rest. It's just on top of the line instead of under it. I don't know why. And then a quarter rest, which is a really kind of squiggle that looks almost like a number 3. And then there's a couple different ways I can notate, is ultimately I'm going to have a note come in here lining up with that last note of that measure. I can either write in an 8th rest, which looks like that, or I can just put a dot after that rest. And what that dot tells me is it modifies the duration of that rest to be 1.5 times its usual length. And it does, putting a dot like that also does the same thing if it goes next to a note. Like if I were to put it, here, let's say, that's actually really bad placement. That's, if I put a dot out there, what that would do is tell me that this is no longer an 8th note. It's the same duration as an 8th plus a 16th. And by putting that dot at that rest, it tells me, okay, it's no longer just a quarter note rest. It's a quarter note plus an extra 8th note. All right. You can see why this is a very slow, well, of course I'm taking the time to explain what I'm doing, but how this can be a very slow process. So let's see, what's my duration there? Gotta figure that out. Keep it simple. 1, 2. And okay, so what I've just done is might do that. It's kind of the same thing again. Okay, and we'll just do okay, so what I've just written in there is 3, 4, 1, 2. Actually, hang on. I might have just done that wrong. This happens a lot. Yeah, I did an extra measure. Oops. Okay, so we'll forget all that. This is actually where working in finale is nice. You can just delete it and redo it. So we're going to have that tied to that. There we go. So what I just put in there in that measure is a dotted half note, which tells me a half note normally is 2 beats, so the dot means it's 1.5 times, it's now 3. And then it's tied to an 8th note. I could put 2 dots after the half note, but you start doing more than 1 dot and it gets hard to read and it's not very commonly done. So it's usually easier just to tie it over to the 8th note, and then that's what that little hump-shaped line means. Is it's a tie, meaning you don't hit that note again. You just hold it for that duration. So we have, starting from the last measure of the top line, and you notice I'm not going to bother putting in the accompaniment pattern again. That sounds kind of nice, right? All right, so what we did was actually just kind of the same thing several times in a row, and all we did was we changed the tonality underneath the melody line, going from here to there. I think that might be Heart and Soul. I'm not positive, but it kind of sounds like that. Oh boy. Music is cool. So now we're going to go D minor down here. Oops. So you can see it's the same. I did not leave myself enough room. That's okay, because when I turn this into an actual finished composition, I'll be putting it in finale and all that stuff will get sorted out. This is just getting the initial ideas down. So now we have... And I was talking about tension earlier. The cool thing about dropping down to a B flat, it adds a lot of richness, which is cool, right? And it also just creates all kinds of tension, having, if they were in the same register, that's what that would sound like. Now it starts to resolve. Kind of see the technique here. Let's see. It's kind of the same thing. And incidentally, these notes that look a little bit like quarter notes but have the little beep coming off that tail coming off the stem are 8th notes. That's how a single 8th note is written. For ease of reading, they get barred together when you have more than, when you have at least 2 of them in a row. You typically bar them together. Now in this case, in this middle line on the page, I'm not barring those last couple 8th notes of the measures together. That would look like, if I were to do that, it would look kind of weird. It would look like this. The problem with doing that is by barring them together, you're making it look like those notes that have that connecting bar, that they go together. And in this case, the placement and the measure, the fact that one of them is tied to this first note of the measure, so you're not repeating it, it's just held through that duration. These notes actually really don't have anything to do with each other. So for that reason, unlike what we did, or what I did in the bass clef notes along the first line, I was barring all these 8th notes together. For that reason I just mentioned, we write these as single 8th notes, and that just provides a visual indicator that, oh, okay, these are not connected to each other. This last one in the measure here, this one is the start of something new. Oops. Okay, then we're going to drop down to B flat here. just going to do that once because I'm trying to fit as much as I can on one page. And this is actually kind of cool having it up on the screen here because I don't have to look at the iPad to play what I just did. So what we have here now is starting at the beginning. And you see what I did there that I didn't do the first time around is what did I do? That's what I did. Okay, see, sometimes I have to play through things a bunch of times so I get it in my head long enough or strongly enough that I can actually write it down. So... Okay, so now we want to get this written down. Same thing again. Actually, not the same thing again. Oops. Hey, eraser. There we are. Okay. So you can see what I was talking about with ledger, what they're called ledger lines. When you're writing in these extra lines above the staff lines, for obvious reasons, the further up you go, the harder it gets to read. And I've got printed scores where there's some kind of flourish or something, there's just some ridiculous note passage that takes place way up here, and for some inexplicable reason, the editors didn't put in a symbol that tells you to play everything an octave higher. In other words, up here instead of, you write it down here, but you're playing it up here. They don't always do that. Sometimes they write it out in ledger lines, and it's like literally you're sitting there going, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's this note. 1, 2, the next one is, okay, the next one's there, and the next one's there. And you kind of have to memorize it because it's just impossible to read it off the ledger lines. So my whole philosophy in writing music is why make it harder to read than it needs to be, right? Ultimately, the goal is for people to be able to play it, right? I think that's the idea. Okay, so we're resolving to a C, ba-boo. We'll do C in the bass. Completely out of room now, but we get the idea. All right, so now starting in the middle of that second line. Probably not going to be writing an entire composition. This is feeling like it wants to be longer than a couple pages. All right, so wait a minute. So actually, what I should have done was written these as whole notes. So you can see when I write in those circles with no stems at all, those are whole notes. That tells me those notes are held for the duration of the measure. In other words, 4 beats in this case. In the previous measure, if they're open circles but with stems coming off of them, then they're half notes, so they're 2 beats in duration. And a lot of this, like that note wasn't all that clearly, that's not much better. it wasn't all that clearly written, but you kind of get it from, at least for me, since I'm the one writing it, I can get it from context. But for this reason, I don't like trying to play scores, handwritten scores from even the great composers. Like Chopin was famous for writing stuff just absolutely minuscule. Beethoven, I think Beethoven's scores usually looked like he slept in them and ate his dinner on them. And on top of that, he was blindfolded when he wrote stuff down. Yeah, but not many composers take the time, at least in antiquity, when they wrote stuff on paper. They took the time to make nice, neat, handwritten scores. That's what copy editors and publishers were for. They would have to figure out what the heck the composer meant, which incidentally is a lot of the reason why there can be conflicting versions of different pieces. Kind of just like with books, right? If there were translation mistakes that were made and then propagated throughout subsequent copies, it could be hard to go back and correct it or figure out what was the original version of this. Same thing, that there's pieces by Chopin where he wrote stuff so small, it is just not clear what the note was supposed to be. And same thing with Beethoven, it's just, you look at it and you're just like, I don't know. Sometimes maybe you can get it from a similar passage later and think, okay, well, he did that here, so that's probably what he meant in this other spot too. Not always the case. So there are different and slightly conflicting versions of different pieces out there. Interesting little side note. All right, let's see. How are we doing on? Oops. No. I don't have a clock on there. Oh, there we go. Wow. We've been on for almost an hour. Probably what I'll do is I'll finish up this little idea and get very far. I'll work on this over the next couple weeks and hopefully in my next show have a finished composition or hopefully something to present to you guys. So let's get at least as far as that glissando. What, Amanda? Uh-oh. Yeah, let's do that. It's easy. Oops. I guess I'll write out this measure. And typically when noting a glissando, that was terrible. Typically what we do, we're going all the way up there, holy moly. Let's see. That'd be an octave, that would be 15 VA. Okay. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. All right. And I'm using one of the octave symbols. Okay, so what I just noted there, obviously the left-hand part, the bottom part, is similar to what's come before, so you can kind of see what I'm doing there. So that first note I wrote in that bottom measure is middle C. You can see it kind of hanging below the staff line there with ledger lines. And then I just wrote a line, and then my stopping note way up here. Now, I mentioned earlier, I hate having to try to read all these extra ledger lines because the note that's written on the page, if you ignore the 15 VA thing above it, that's this note. But it's going all the way up here. So instead of using all the extra ledger lines to write the actual note that I'm playing, I write 15 VA. That's a not super frequently used, but it is a symbol that tells you to play a note 2 octaves higher than where it's written. If I had written 8 VA, that tells me to play it 1 octave higher. I don't know why it's not 16 VA, it's 15. I don't know, it's weird. That tells me to play the glissando, and that's what the gliss means, is glissando. That's just when you do that. And that just tells me to stop up there. So now what we have on this page is this. really should be. Challenge with the glissando is, because obviously you can run your finger up the keyboard as fast as you want, is not doing it too fast, depending on the amount of time you're trying to fill with the, So you're trying to get these notes roughly equal duration and to fill exactly the same amount of time that you're doing that. Yeah. And then we would go back to the beginning idea. And usually what happens here, so what we've done is we've made a musical phrase. Oops. See how simple it is. Expanding it a bit. Usually what you want to do here is something different. I've got no idea if that's where ultimately this will end up going. Probably not, because I'm not going to remember that longer than like 5 minutes. I have the memory capacity of a gnat when it comes to this stuff. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed that. I'll play a couple things, a couple actual things. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this. It'll be interesting to hear feedback. If you hated it, let me know. I probably won't do this kind of thing that much. If I may not ever do it again, but it seemed like something might be kind of fun to share, some of that process. And you know, as Amanda kept saying about the Beatles documentary we were watching, you know, when you watch the video of Paul McCartney as he's just kind of strumming his guitar and he's really getting going, and then all of a sudden the chords and the notes for Get Back start to come out, and you could hear where he's going with it before he actually gets there, because of course now we know the finished song. And it's amazing. Yeah, it's just incredible to watch somebody create something out of nothing. And that's, you know, what the heck is that? Seem to have lost my pencil. That's weird. Did it fall? Am I sitting on it? Yep, sitting on it. Okay, here we go. But that's something that's always kind of been cool to me, maybe not in so many words, but just the fact that I guess I have that ability that I don't know that I ever really appreciated, that a lot of people don't have. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see where I take this, especially once I start getting it in Finale. You know, there have been times where I've handwritten stuff out and just kind of like this, and then I start putting it in Finale and I realize, oh my gosh, my note durations aren't right. Stuff's not lining up the way it's supposed to, or it didn't fill up the whole measure the way I thought it would. What in the heck was I actually playing? And I wrote it down wrong. You know, because what I play, I can tell, okay, yeah, it's in time and everything. It sounds fine. And I've just like written stuff down completely wrong. Yeah, this I think is fine. So this is an initial musical phrase, and as I said a second ago, before I started kind of improvising on it, yeah, we want to restate it. That's a good way to really reinforce it. But then you want to take it somewhere different, do something that contrasts with what you heard the first time around. You just want to play the same thing twice in a row. And then typically, as you could hear maybe in a little bit in that improv, typically once you've done that, kind of fiddled around with that musical idea, you can then bring in something else, something that contrasts with it. Play through it again. There we are. Something sounds semi-finished. And like I said earlier, what I write down will probably be nothing like that. So, as far as, let's see, now if we turn this off. No. Oh, now you can see a picture of Amanda. Let's see. There's the remote. Because it's signed into your Zoom. Yeah. Oh wait, I can turn off the. There. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's do that. Oh, my. Okay. My picture, my Epicam seems to have gotten behind where. No, I'm. It's like the video's out of sync. It's like there's a slight delay. That's what I'm trying to say. No, 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 no. There's a delay. Oh no, there's not. Now it's fine. Okay, never mind. It was just being stupid. Sure. How do you do that? We got to pass you the remote. Okay. The keyboard's over there. All right, we have the technical assistance here. Yeah, apparently when you create a scene in OBS, there's a couple ways to copy and paste stuff from. So I was duplicating an existing scene, and then we were going to modify it to create the 2-up scene. Oh, what, do you just want to tell me what to do? Okay. Do I need the keyboard?
Yeah.
No.
So what you need to do is click on
Okay.
the epicam.
Where's the?
Yeah, that's why I was like, I can't do that.
There we go. Click on this. Okay.
Yeah, and then wait, you have to press Alt.
Oh. What happens if I don't? Hey.
Stretch. Oh, I know, it's the worst. It'll just stretch the video.
Hey, look at that. That's so cool. That was easy.
Yeah.
Okay, here. Get that back. Thank you. All right.
Because originally, I didn't know it was a reference, so that's why I cut it. So you're going to be that and not
Yeah.
permanently like that.
Yeah, so I was starting to say there's a couple ways you can copy and paste stuff in OBS. So I was creating, so we wouldn't have to completely create a new scene to do the two-up view. I was creating a duplicate of the existing view that you're seeing now, and then once I had the duplicate created, then the idea was we would just modify it to get the two-up view. Well, didn't realize there are a couple different ways you can copy and paste stuff, one of which is reference, which means it's making the same changes to both versions of the scene. So yeah, it's kind of annoying. If you don't paste it as reference, then you can edit the two independently of each other. But if you do paste it as reference, then it does that. That's really dumb. I mean, I'm sure there's reasons why you'd want to do that. I don't know what they are. Well, I'm going to start off. I'm going to play you guys the finished Magical Mystery Hour theme. This is the most recent thing I've written. I'll play a couple of my own compositions here. Got to make sure the page turning pedals are working before I need them. I sure hope that was audible all the way to the end. That's one of the few times I've actually that I've hit this last low note hard enough that when I hold it down with the middle pedal, I'll explain in a sec what the middle pedal does on this piano. When I hold it down with the middle pedal, that it actually sustained it all the way through to the end. I mean, it was very faint at the end, but it was still there, which is exactly the effect I was going for with that. So on more modern grand pianos, the middle pedal, I've probably said this on my show before, but the middle pedal will hold the damper, the thing that stops the string from vibrating. It'll hold the damper up for whichever specific note anywhere on the keyboard, whichever specific note you have just played. You hold it down, push the middle pedal down, it'll hold up the damper for that and sustain that one note. All the other ones would still sound like that. The far right hand pedal, on the other hand, pulls the dampers up for all the notes. So it's where you get that. On this piano, this is an old grand, obviously this thing's 130 odd years old. So they hadn't figured out yet that newer, more modern pedal mechanism where it just holds a single damper up. So on this piano, I forget exactly where the cutoff is. There it is. So the middle pedal on this piano just holds up the dampers for the bottom 3 octaves on the keyboard. So it works a little bit differently, but obviously that's well within the range of where the middle pedal's holding those dampers up. So if I do that, I can still, if I hold down the other pedal, anyhow, that was what I was going for there, and it actually worked that time. Yay! So I think this piece might actually be a good one to use as an example of a lot of things I was talking about when I was working on the other one. Very simple. And then you got your conflict, your stress. Very unstable. And I did this very much on purpose. You notice that up until the end when you get that thing down there, you don't have, this is an E flat minor. A chord sounds the most stable when that note, E flat, is the lowest one in the chord. In this case, it isn't. It's sitting up here on top. Lowest note is this G flat here. So it creates, just by doing that, you're creating some instability. And that's what I was going for with this, was I didn't want it to sound completely grounded. And there are some other spots where, like when it modulates the G flat major, sounds fine. It sounds very, very stable, very grounded. So it's yet another technique that you can use. It very much as a subconscious thing. There's just something the human ear picks up on. It's like, that doesn't sound. It just sounds like it wants to go somewhere. It doesn't sound like it's at peace with itself. Let's see, what else? What else? What have I not played in a long? Well, actually, I probably don't want to play stuff I haven't played in a long time. Let's see. I'll probably keep it some of these shorter ones. I really like this one. All right, so this is the Sonatina movement. I've played a few times on my show, and everybody really likes. A little bit longer piece. I always forget to mention, every time I play this one, I always forget to mention, there is, a bit in here that is a quote of Beethoven's 32nd Piano Sonata. So if you're familiar with that piece, it's... That's straight out of Beethoven. Did it on purpose. When I was writing this piece, I felt a very strong pull that direction. Just felt like that's where the music needed to go. So I was like, you know what? As long as I'm gonna write something that sounds similar, I'm just gonna lift it completely and just have a quote in there from Beethoven. Apparently, I'm tired. All right, so listen for that when I get there with this. This is the can be played as a standalone piece, but intended to be the first of three movements, three preludes played right in a row. This is number one. I do love that one. That is one of my favorites. Where did my cursor go? Hello. There we go. All right, maybe do one more. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do promos. I actually have some graphics for promos. So, coming up tomorrow night, we've got Amanda on Demanda. And this is show number 99, so it's party like it's 1999. All 90s shows. I don't know if she's restricting it to just songs from 1999 or if it's all the 90s. Amanda? Oh, just 99. Okay. Just making sure. All right. And obviously submit your request to amandaondemanda.com since she has her own website up and running. It's pretty cool. Go check it out if you haven't yet. And that is going to be a rollicking good time. I'm looking forward to that show. So join us tomorrow night at 8. Thursday night, for the first time in quite a while, Paul's got an In the Cove. It'll be at 9:15 p.m. And I realized chronologically I should have done this one first, because this is Thursday night at 8 p.m. Hunter's Lovecast number 135. And Hunter puts on a great show every single time, singing, guitar playing, harmonica sometimes, occasionally scientific discussions. It's awesome. It's always a good time. And he's very, very responsive to people in the chat, which is very cool and very difficult to do. You notice I'm not very good at it. Even when I do have the chat thing up here, I hardly know what's going on there. So join us for that, 8 p.m. on Thursday, and then immediately following that at 9:15 is Paul's Next in the Cove, and which yours truly will be playing something. Don't know what yet. Figure that out tomorrow. Amanda's going to be on the show. Craig Jackman, Nicole Pierce, Wendy Walker, possibly some others. So that's going to be a fun 2-year anniversary show. Healthy this time around instead of the first couple of times when the original show was very much not. Yeah, it's going to be a fun show. So join us on Thursday for that. And I think that was the last promo graphic I have. Yeah, that was it. Okay, there we go. Oh, there's applause and stuff going. Huh. All right. So those are the upcoming shows. We do have a game. I'm assuming anyway, there's going to be Gaming with Daria a week from tonight. And then presumably Amanda's show will be, again, a week from Wednesday and so on and so forth. So should be a fun rest of the week. Okay, let's see. Let's do one more here. Maybe one was. No, but I probably can't play the end of that. I haven't played most of these pieces in a really long time. Oh, there's transcriptions. I forgot about these. Yeah, I think maybe I'll end the night on one I didn't write. Reading it's going to be fun. Okay, I haven't played this one in a while. It's not super difficult, but the way it's written on the page is a little bit wonky, but it's really pretty. So this is by a 20th century Russian composer you may have heard of by the name of Dmitri Shostakovich. This is the slow movement from his second piano concerto. And I have reduced it to be playable on a single piano. So in other words, I took the original piano part. It's actually a 2-piano version of the piece that Shostakovich had done. Composers oftentimes create, for piano and orchestra pieces, they'll create a 2-piano version where they write the orchestra part for a piano, and then what was originally the piano part is played by another piano, and that's for rehearsal purposes, typically. You don't usually see those versions performed because the whole idea is to get the performer, the pianist, ready to play with the orchestra. So I had a copy of a 2-piano version of this piece that I then worked those 2 scores into a single one that's playable on one piano. And it's really pretty. This is one I don't remember if I've ever played it on my show. I know I've meant to a couple times and just didn't. So here we go. right. Hope you guys like that. I love that piece. That was just so cool. Overall, it's kind of funny. Overall, I'm not a huge Shostakovich fan. He's I don't know, just kind of starts to get a little bit too modern sounding for me, too 20th century sounding. Overall, I don't love a lot of the 20th century stuff. And the things I do like are more like Rachmaninoff and Bortkovich, and the occasional Shostakovich and early Scriabin that are sound much more like they came out of the late 19th century. Um, yeah, but that particular piece, I don't even know how I got a copy of why I got a copy of the score of that piano concerto. The only thing I can think of is I must have heard a recording of it and wanted to be able to play it. Obviously, there's a lot of extra notes because you have to trying to play the orchestra part and the piano part at the same time. Just the piano part by itself is much easier. But yeah, really, really cool piece of music. And I think you can probably hear in there are some unusual modulations that he does, going from sounds good, but it's not something that a composer in the 19th century would have necessarily done. Um, so anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight. I had fun showing you compositional technique such as it was, and in a couple of weeks hopefully I will have something, if not completely finished, because I don't know how far I'll get, but if not completely finished, then at least something substantial to share with you guys. And in the meantime, we will see you hopefully tomorrow night for Amanda on Demanda, and then we'll see you on Thursday for Hunter Show and In the Cove immediately after. Thanks again for being here tonight. It was a lot of fun, and I will see you guys later. Good night.